The studio lights glowed warm as the band wrapped up the intro, their final notes bouncing off the walls while the audience clapped in perfect rhythm. When Morgan Freeman walked out, the applause swelled into something deeper than routine excitement. It was reverence. He moved with unhurried grace, offering a modest wave, his presence alone commanding the room. Stephen Colbert met him at center stage, smiling broadly, almost boyish, as if greeting a hero he'd admired long before sharing a desk with him. They shook hands, exchanged a quick joke about the cold New York weather, and settled into their chairs. For a few minutes, it felt like a classic late-night moment, comfortable, charming, safe. Colbert opened with stories from Freeman's legendary career, teasing him about the voice of God, reputation, and joking that audiences trusted him more than their own GPS. Freeman chuckled, that familiar, velvety sound rolling through the room, and offered dry, understated replies that drew easy laughs. He spoke about choosing roles carefully now, about slowing down, about the privilege of still being curious at his age. The audience leaned in, soaking up every word. Camera operators relaxed, the band smiled, and the producers behind the glass nodded along. Everything was flowing exactly as planned. Then Colbert shifted slightly in his chair. His tone stayed light, but there was a new edge beneath the humor. He referenced a recent interview Freeman had given, one where his comments had sparked debate online. At first, Freeman answered calmly, clarifying what he meant, emphasizing nuance and context. Colbert nodded, but instead of moving on, he followed up, framing the question differently, sharpening it, inviting contrast rather than understanding. The audience laughed softly, sensing a playful push, but Freeman's expression changed. His smile lingered for a beat too long before fading. Freeman leaned back, hands folded loosely in his lap, eyes fixed on Colbert. He replied slowly, choosing each word with care, explaining that complex issues couldn't be reduced to viral soundbites. His voice remained steady, but something in it had cooled. Colbert responded with another quip, trying to keep the energy buoyant, yet the joke didn't quite land. A few laughs scattered across the studio, thinner this time. Freeman tilted his head, listening, then gently corrected Colbert on a detail. It wasn't confrontational, but it was unmistakably firm. Colbert laughed again, a little louder, brushing it off as semantics, and pressed forward. He framed the topic as a cultural responsibility, suggesting that public figures needed to take clearer stances. Freeman's eyebrows lifted slightly. He leaned forward now, elbows resting on his knees, posture signaling engagement rather than ease. He spoke about the danger of oversimplification, about how moral certainty can become performance when cameras are involved. The room grew quieter. Even the band stopped reacting. Audience members shifted in their seats, unsure whether to clap or stay silent. Colbert tried to pivot with humor once more, but Freeman interjected, politely, yet decisively. He pointed out that the question itself carried an assumption, and that assumptions, when repeated often enough, start to masquerade as truth. The word, respect, entered the conversation, spoken calmly but weighted with meaning. Colbert's smile tightened. He defended the role of satire, the necessity of challenging powerful voices. Freeman nodded once, acknowledging the point, but countered that challenge without listening was just provocation. A hush settled over the studio. You could hear the low hum of the lights, the faint rustle of cue cards. Producers behind the scenes exchanged glances, one of them lifting a headset. Microphone closer to his mouth but saying nothing. Colbert shifted in his chair, sensing the gravity of the moment, and softened his tone, attempting to reframe the exchange as healthy debate. Freeman didn't raise his voice. He didn't interrupt again. He simply held Colbert's gaze, his expression calm but resolute, as if weighing whether the conversation still deserved his participation. The audience felt it then, not excitement, not humor, but tension, heavy and unmistakable, hanging in the air just before something breaks. The moment stretched longer than anyone expected. Freeman remained still, eyes steady, the silence doing more work than any raised voice could have. Colbert cleared his throat, offered a conciliatory smile, and tried to guide the exchange back toward safer ground, mentioning an upcoming project and praising Freeman's influence on generations of actors. For a heartbeat, it looked like the storm might pass. Freeman nodded politely, but he didn't relax. The shift had already happened, and everyone in the room knew it couldn't simply be undone with a compliment. Freeman spoke again, quietly, but the authority in his tone commanded attention. He said influence was not a costume to put on for television, not something to be summoned on cue for applause. He talked about conversations needing space to breathe, about disagreement losing its value when it's shaped for reaction instead of reflection. The audience responded with hesitant claps, unsure whether they were endorsing a point or witnessing the unraveling of a live show. Colbert listened, hands clasped, then responded that television, by nature, thrives on friction, that discomfort sparks dialogue. His voice was measured, but defensive now, the humor stripped away. Freeman's lips pressed into a thin line. He rose slightly in his chair, then settled back, as if deciding how far to go. When he spoke again, it wasn't anger that surfaced, but disappointment. He said there was a difference between friction and force, between inviting someone to speak and steering them toward a corner. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. The band members exchanged glances. A producer offstage raised a hand, signaling for Colbert to wrap it up soon. Colbert tried one last time to lighten the mood, joking about late-night shows being terrible places for subtlety. A few laughs escaped, but they felt nervous, almost apologetic. Freeman didn't laugh. He placed his hands on the arms of the chair and stood, slowly, deliberately. The movement alone drew gasps. He thanked Colbert for the invitation, his voice calm, almost gentle, and then thanked the audience for their time. He added that he believed some conversations were better had without an audience waiting for a punchline. For a second, Colbert looked genuinely startled. He stood as well, instinctively reaching out with a hand, as if to pause the moment. He said they could continue off camera, that there was no need to end it this way. Freeman met his eyes, offered a small, respectful nod, and said that was precisely his point. The studio fell silent. The red recording light blinked, and then blinked again. Somewhere behind the curtain, a stage manager whispered urgently into a headset. As Freeman turned toward the exit, a mix of reactions erupted, some applause, some stunned quiet, a few scattered cheers. Colbert stood frozen, caught between host and spectator, watching a legend walk off his stage. The band didn't play. The cameras hesitated, then followed Freeman's retreating back before cutting abruptly to a wide shot. Colbert faced the audience again, exhaled, and attempted to regain control, thanking viewers and promising to return after the break. His voice carried, but the ease was gone. Backstage, the energy was frantic. Assistants hurried down hallways, producers spoke in clipped sentences, phones already lighting up with messages from network executives. Freeman moved calmly through it all, acknowledging crew members with polite nods, his expression unchanged. When someone apologized on Colbert's behalf, Freeman simply said there were no hard feelings, only boundaries. He stepped into his car moments later, the door closing with a soft, definitive click. By the time the show resumed, social media was already buzzing. Clips were being uploaded, captions written in real time, opinions forming before the final commercial break aired. Some called Freeman courageous, others accused him of overreacting. Colbert finished the show professionally, but his closing joke fell flat, the weight of the moment still lingering. The next morning, headlines framed it as a clash, a confrontation, a kicking off. But for those who were there, it felt more complicated than that. It wasn't a shouting match or a scandalous outburst. It was a quiet collision of expectations, television's hunger for heat meeting a man unwilling to be shaped by it. And long after the cameras shut down, that image remained, Morgan Freeman choosing to stand up, walk away, and leave the noise behind, even as it roared louder than ever.